There are those that love to shoot straight out of the camera JPEGs, and they get great images. Then there are those that love to shoot RAW and spend hours in Lightroom or Photolab editing. But what if you want the power of a RAW without the hassle of the editing? Today we're going to look at DxO PureRAW 6. Let's get into it. So, as you know, a RAW file is a very basic, almost dump of the image data from the sensor into a file. There's a few little things that are done to it to create that image, but very little is done to it to produce an image. There's no white balance added, there's no sharpening added, there's no contrast or color control added. It's a pure RAW file. And that means it takes time. You need to put it into an editing suite and actually take your time to get that image looking great. Now, back in the days before Lightroom and even Apple's Aperture, we had standalone RAW processors. It was the only way we could get our RAW files processed. You would go into that RAW file converter, do the little edits that you required, and then output it as a JPEG or a TIFF in order to edit it in Photoshop or whatever editing suite you were using. Lightroom and Photolab and other apps like that have changed that completely. We can now process the RAWs inside of Photolab, for example. And that leads me on to the idea of why do we still need RAW converters? Adobe Camera Raw is the granddaddy, if you like, of RAW converters, and it's still around. It's a bit of anachronism because most photographers, if they've got the Lightroom package, they've got the Photoshop package, they don't need the Adobe Camera Raw. You can do your developing in Lightroom, send it over to Photoshop, and then do your layers and stuff like that, the more advanced editing in Photoshop. And yet Adobe Camera Raw still exists, and it's a very powerful and somewhat complex RAW editor. There's so many nuances to it that it almost becomes like editing in Lightroom, but without the flexibility of the image management. Now, there's a lot of people that want the flexibility of a RAW. They want to be able to edit those RAWs perhaps at a later date, but also want to get those RAW files from a flat look into something looking fairly decent very quickly, perhaps in a batch. And for that reason, DxO have PureRAW. The current version is PureRAW 6, and we're going to be looking at that today. Now, as you know, I'm on a bit of a journey with the DxO products. PureRAW is not one that I've particularly looked at, but this one has piqued my interest, and there's several reasons for that, and I'll go into that when we have a look at some images in the app itself. Now, if you like PureRAW, I do have a 15% discount code for it, and I will leave a link for that in the description below. So the concept behind PureRAW is simply to apply the corrections very quickly, very automatically. Use AI to get rid of any noise from the image. You can also get rid of any dust spots using AI. The idea is you put your images into PureRAW, you can quickly process them and then output them either as DNGs, compressed DNGs, which is very useful, and we'll talk about that in a little while, or JPEG or TIFF. So you've got that flexibility to output the files, but without having to spend loads of time trying to work out all the complexities of, for example, Adobe Camera Raw. So it's not an editor, it's a pure RAW converter, as its name suggests. It's very similar in concept to those very early RAW converters. They did the RAW conversion and then you can work on the image as you required afterwards, or you could just put it straight out to print or to screen, however you wish. So I'm going to go into PureRAW. I've got it set up on my machine here, and we're going to have a look at some of its functions. And we're going to start with this image, which is one you might have seen from an earlier video, looking at DxO Photolab's noise reduction. We're going to look at the noise reduction in PureRAW. This image was shot at 12,800 ISO. It's on a Sony A7R5, and it's noisy. So we're going to start with that image, and we're going to process it in DxO PureRAW. And let's get into it. So this is DxO PureRAW opening up, And the first thing that we need to do is add some raw images to the light box. So we'll do that, and I've got the 4 images that I'm going to work on in this demonstration. So we'll add the photos. Now, as you might be aware, DxO is famous for its lens correction software, and because I have a mixture of different cameras and lenses here, it's asking me to download the particular combinations of modules for those cameras. So let's do that, and we'll press save, and it will actually download those. And before we get into the images, let's have a quick look at some of the settings. It's very, very simple here. Your preferences are your languages. There's 5 or 6 languages there. And your DeepPRIME acceleration, this is the sort of AI guts of the processor. I'm on a Mac and I'm using the auto selection, which is using the Apple Neural Engine. If you're on PC, you might find that the GPU is actually faster, but my preference is leave it on auto selection. DxO PureRAW widget will allow you to detect a SD card being plugged into your computer, and I leave instant preview on, just a way to see the images working much, much quicker. So let's save that. So this is the first image, and it's very, very noisy. If I go to 100%, you can see there's a lot of noise in it. It's a nice image. It's got potential to be a great image, but in this particular way, it's not looking good. So what we simply do is we go right click, process file. And as you can see, the settings are very, very simple. We have the options of the different types of DeepPRIME. In this case, I can have DeepPRIME 3, or I can have DeepPRIME XD3, which is the most advanced version. So I'm going to switch over to that. Now, if I click on these corrections here, you can see that I've got some extra stuff that comes up here. I can change the luminance and force the details in the noise reduction. I can keep the lens sharpness optimization on or off, change the intensity of that. I can correct vignetting, correct chromatic aberration, and correct the lens distortion. I leave all of those on. And if we come down to the output, you can see we've got DNG, TIFF, JPEG, and Smart Object, which means it can be used directly in Photoshop. The DNG can have a uncompressed or a high fidelity compression. Now this is great. From what I understand from DxO, that can make it 4 times smaller or quarter the size of the original DNG file. I might be wrong with that, but I'm pretty sure that's what they said to me. And that's a real bonus in these days of really expensive hard drives. Now, depending on which output you choose, if I, for example, choose JPEG, I get some extra options. I get the DxO Smart Lighting, which will add some contrast and mid-tone definition to the image and make it look more of a natural looking image. So we'll leave that one on. And then we can select our image output folder, obviously. We'll leave that for the moment. And images remaining, obviously this is for the batch processing. You can actually batch process a whole load at a time. So let's apply those settings and just process now on this particular image. And we wait a few seconds and we can preview the processing right here. And there we go, processing done. Click on view results. We can see the original file here on the left and the process file. As you can see, the image is processed really nicely. If I go up to 100%, and we'll come to the sky because that's particularly noisy, you can see that looks really good. So as you can see, it's done a really reasonable job of processing that file. It's wiped out that noise. You've got an image now that we can output to whatever format that we require. It looks really good. For the next one, I'm just going to take a bog standard generic bland image. It's a RAW file. It's taken in North Yorkshire on the coast. It's nothing special, but I'm just going to pop it into DxO PureRAW and see how it comes out. We're just going to pick this very generic looking image. It's more or less correctly exposed, perhaps a little bit underexposed. It's just a general generic image. And we're going to process this and have a look at see how it comes out. It's not noisy. It's not going to require too much doing to it. We're going to keep the same settings. We're going to go to the XD3 processing. And for the output, again, we'll go for the JPEG and we will use the smart lighting just to see how that image comes out. We'll apply that and we'll process now. And as you can see, there is, particularly if I move this slider over, you can see the lens corrections kicking in, but you can also see that there's an improvement in the contrast in the image. It just looks a little bit more punchier, a little less sort of flat, a little bit more range in the image, and it looks really good. It's a usable image that you could upload to social media, or obviously output it as a DNG and do some more work onto it if you wanted to spend more time in it. So it's done a nice job on that. As I say, we can output that to a DNG file and drop it into Photolab and do some more editing on it, or we can just output it as a JPEG. The next image was taken in Antarctica, and I was down there for about 2 months, at the end of which my camera sensor was getting really dirty. Now this was back in 2009. I hadn't taken a sensor cleaning kit with me, and as you can see from this particular image, there is loads of dust in it. Now DxO has an auto dust removal system. It requires you to output to JPEG, but we're going to give it a go and see how well it does taking the dust out of this image. So this image is very dirty. Now because I've shot to the right, it doesn't show up particularly well, but if I go to 100% and whiz over to this top right corner here, you can see that there's a lot of dust in this image, particularly here and right in these edges. And I believe in the far right edge, yes, you can see here, there's a lot of dust and dirt. Now, I don't know how well DxO is going to work its magic on this. So let's give it a go. We'll go process file. And we're going to return to corrections, and we can see now that because we're outputting to JPEG, we have the dust removal option on. Let's put the dust removal sensitivity up to 80 and see how that does. We'll apply that and we'll process now. Okay, this is the final result. If we scan to the left, yes, it has cleaned up some of the dust. It's looked for more the sort of circular style dust rather than a lot of this stuff that's in the real corners here. If we come to 100%, we can see the stuff in the corner has not really been helped. It may actually not be detecting that as dust. However, the spots that were in the sky area here have definitely been cleaned up. It'll take a little experimentation on your behalf to actually work out what level of correction you require. But overall, it's done a pretty decent job. There will still be work required on it, but it has cleared out some of the more obvious dust bunnies in the image. And as you can see, it's done a pretty reasonable job. There are a few little bits and pieces that I will have to tidy up perhaps in post-production, but overall it's managed to get rid of some of the significant dust bunnies that I have on that image. Lastly, I want to have a look at this image. Now, this image is overexposed. The histogram is off to the right. It's not an image that as a JPEG would edit really well. What I want to do is just drop this into DxO PureRAW and just see how it comes out using the DeepPRIME algorithms and seeing if it actually pulls back any of those highlights and gives us a better looking image than this particular RAW is at the moment. So let's have a look at that. And this is the one that is overexposed. It's quite significantly overexposed. I'm not expecting DxO to make miracles with this, but we will just process the file. With the corrections, we will keep it on the DeepPRIME XD3. We'll keep all the optimizations on, and we will go to the output. We'll output it as a JPEG again. We'll put the smart lighting on, and let's increase the smart lighting up to say 50% to see how we get on with that. We'll apply that and we'll process now. And there we go. Now, you can see immediately that it has brought down some of those highlights. It's not massively corrected it. However, if we were to output that as a DNG file, we'd be able to further work on that and bring some more recovery into it. You bring the slider over here, it has done a reasonable image, particularly if you're looking at the sky and the left-hand side here. It has brought down some details. So that's quite interesting, and it does show that even if you've got an overexposed file, you can get a reasonable JPEG output from it if you don't want to faff around in Photolab or, for example, Lightroom. So overall, really interesting, and really like the interface on this. It's just so simple to use, and I could certainly see fairly newcomers to photography and those that don't want to edit too much really getting some really good use out of this. So I hope you've enjoyed a look at DxO PureRAW. It's a really ideal program for those photographers that don't want to spend hours in Photolab or Lightroom editing, but want the flexibility of a RAW processor without all the complexities of, say, Adobe Camera Raw. It has a simple interface, it does a simple job, and it outputs a really nice quality image. The fact that you can output it to compressed DNG files is a real bonus in this day of hard drive prices going through the roof. And the fact that you can denoise and remove spots also are really fantastic additions to what is just a simple RAW converter. As I mentioned earlier, I do have a 15% discount on this and all other DxO products, and I will leave the links for those in the description below. Do you use RAW converters just standalone? Perhaps Adobe Camera Raw? Perhaps PureRAW? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed the video, a thumbs up would be fantastic. A subscription would be even better. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.